in Pennsylvania, and just a little bit of the background, and then how you obtain a divorce. And this is all too common. How you obtain a divorce if your spouse is uncooperative, won't sign papers, or you can't find them. You don't know where they are, and that happens more often than you would think. But it's interesting. The concept of a no-fault divorce is really a pretty recent development in the law. Prior to the Divorce Code of 1980 being enacted, there was no way to get a divorce unless one spouse had done something wrong. It was not possible for two adults who were married to just say, "Hey, we want to end our marriage. We don't dislike one another. We don't have any significant problems. There's not abuse. There's not abandonment. There's not some issue like that. We just want to get a divorce." You couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So it was, you had to in order to obtain a divorce, you had to go into court. You had to allege that your spouse had abused you, had abandoned you, had become incarcerated or in a mental institution, or had done what they call committed indignities. And that was kind of a catch-all phrase for your spouse had done something to make your life unbearable.
Mm-hmm.
So, what would happen? Because, of course, there were just as many people then as there are now that decide, okay, our marriage is broken and we want to get a divorce. So how did you do it? What you did basically was you had one spouse file for divorce. They would allege a fault base. Usually they would allege that their spouse had committed indignities because that was a very broad fault base for divorce. And then there actually had to be a hearing. For every divorce, there had to be a full evidentiary hearing to determine whether the fault bases were met. And so you had the other spouse that would come in. Both spouses would give testimony. They would lie through their teeth and perjure themselves and say, "Yep, he committed indignities against me," and the husband would say, "Yes, I committed indignities against her. I don't contest that." And the judge, with a wink and a nod, would rubber stamp the divorce, and that's how you got a divorce.
Nice.
The Divorce Code of 1980 changed all that. Now we have broad no-fault divorce in Pennsylvania, just like there is everywhere else in the country.
So basically, what the no-fault divorce does, it allows people who realize that they can't work together or there's other irreconcilable differences that do not stem from, say, a crime or anything of that nature. They can go ahead and say, "Hey, we'd like to get a divorce in that case." And from what it sounds like, it's less damaging to one person's record, because if there is an indignity reported in this, then that sounds like it goes on your record.
Well, it was a civil, divorce is a civil matter, but sure, there would be a record that you had done something wrong to your spouse, and so and like I said, you had to actually go into court, and at least one spouse had to be there at the hearing, and just lie through their teeth and say, "Yeah, I did this stuff," or "Yeah, he did these things," and right. So when the legislature finally realized that there was a sea change in society occurring, and people were not just sticking in broken marriages for their entire lives because that's what they thought they had to do, then the legislature stepped in and said, "Okay, we're going to amend the law." So
talk about a little bit more about maybe getting a divorce when things are getting uncooperative between partners. I guess, say, one person just refuses to cooperate with the proceedings.
Sure. So under no-fault divorce case, 99.9% of all divorces now are no-fault divorces, filed under one of two code sections in the Divorce Code, Section 3301C or Section 3301D. Very simple. 3301C divorce is a divorce by mutual consent. This is where a divorce complaint has been filed. 90 days has passed from the date that divorce complaint was served on the other party, and both parties have signed off at some point after that saying, "We agree, We've settled all of our issues, whether they be financial issues, spousal support, alimony, all these, the equitable distribution of marital property, and they sign off and say, okay, we both agree that a divorce decree should be entered, and the file goes to the judge takes a look at it and says, okay, everybody's consented, everybody's signed off, and the judge enters a divorce decree, and you are divorced by mutual consent. That is a 3301C divorce, by far the most common type of divorce.
Mm-hmm.
A 3301D divorce is a little different. This is where you have one spouse who is not cooperating, or maybe it's a situation where you just can't reach a resolution. You can't reach an agreement on those financial things. But more often than not, it is where one spouse is not cooperating, not amenable to the divorce, or probably more often just not responding. You know, you can file a divorce, you can serve somebody, and sometimes you make settlement proposals, send them letters, things like this, and they just don't respond. They don't return your calls for whatever reason, not cooperative. Sometimes it's a spouse, and this happens quite a bit. People are separated for a long time. Nobody takes action to finalize the divorce, and one spouse just kind of drops off the map. You can't find them,
right.
And then you have the only way to obtain a divorce is through this 3301D procedure. So that is the section of the law that gives a spouse the ability to obtain a divorce. And one of the keys with that is you have to have been separated for at least 1 year. They recently scaled that back. It used to be 3 years, and then 2 years, and now it's one year. So mm-hmm. This loosening up of the divorce law continues to this day. But you have to be separated for 1 year, and if so, you can file with the court. You do serve it on the other person and say, okay, here's your notice under 3301D that I'm requesting that the court enter a divorce decree. If they don't respond, if the person doesn't respond at that point, you can obtain a divorce decree
right.
without their participating. If you can't locate them, that notice can be served by alternative means. Courts have allowed service by email, by Facebook, by publication in the newspaper, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And generally, this procedure is used most often where the parties don't have stuff to fight over, right?
Yeah.
We don't own a house together. We don't have significant joint marital assets, joint bank accounts, retirement accounts, things that need to be dealt with and divided as part of the divorce procedure. And there are lots of these situations. Like I said, people separated. I did one where some people were separated for almost 30 years. They
wow.
had no connection financially or in any other way. So with the 3301D divorce procedure, within about 90 days, we had them divorced. But that's the way it works.
It sounds like with this no-fault divorce procedures, no matter which way you go, whether it is the consenting or the other method that you just explained, it sounds like the process goes a lot quicker than it would with a fault divorce as well.
I think that's true. You can obtain a divorce more quickly. Sometimes it can be done without even having to appear in court. Right.
Wow.
The papers get filed if we have agreements on things, or if one party gets served and doesn't respond. As long as the file's in order and you have someone that knows what they're doing, that all the correct documents are prepared and filed and served and done the right way, and you have notices in the file, the judge can take a look at the file and see, okay, all the steps were done, all the requirements were met, and sign a divorce decree without the parties ever setting foot in the courthouse.
One other thing about the one that comes without the where it's an uncooperative party. Does the party that is going through the paperwork and going through the work to try to get this done, do they have to show at least some sort of effort to try to reach the other party?
Absolutely. That's a good point. You do, if you can't find somebody and you want to file what's called a motion for alternative service, saying, Judge, I want to serve this person by electronic means or by publication in the newspaper or something, yes, you're going to have to go through all the steps. In that motion, you're going to have to lay out all the steps you took to find the person. Online searches, potentially maybe having an investigator look for them, and looking, in the phone book and all the things that you would think, how am I going to find somebody if I can't locate them? You have to go through all the steps that you took and then say, Judge, I don't know how else to find this person, so please allow me to serve them by X, Y, and Z method.
All right. If anybody has any questions about either of these topics or any sort of pressing legal matters, they can certainly get a hold of you and everybody over at your firm, right?
Yeah, that's right. You can call me at 724-465-5826. Stop and see me in the old R&P Coal Building at 655 Church Street in Indiana, or go online to www.westernpalawyer.com.
Marsh, we're right up at the mark. Hey, thanks a lot for joining us here on Indiana in the Morning. Can't wait to hear what the next segment brings.
Thanks, Josh. I'll see you around.
See you around. Marshall Chriswell joining us for Martial Law here on Indiana in the Morning, presented by First Commonwealth Bank.